Revolution, destruction. Part of our world demands these things now, whether it's the protests in the streets, the wars around the world, or the wannabe dictators taking control. Our stable order is safe for now, but for how long? On this channel, we've discussed destruction, revolution, and other facets of our changing world. But today, we're going to discuss how to survive those things. Because very often, they are out of our hands. Change, whether it's peaceful or violent, comes for us all. 100 years ago, the women's movement was just a blip. Fast forward to today, and the whole of norms have changed for women, from voting to relationships and more. The same could be said of technology, government, everything. It's as though nothing changes at all, but everything becomes different. So how do we cope? Well, I think the answer lies in the fictional story of Alexander Rostov, an aristocrat who is sentenced to house arrest in a hotel by the Russian Revolution. He witnesses the greatest changes of his country and is stripped of his identity, all while trying to care for those around him. His story, though not true, is one that shows us how to cope with the massive and often destructive change and progress that is the hallmark of modern times. We blindly like to believe that all progress is good. Out with the old and in with the new, the motto that has changed out governments, technology, people, and more. And progress can be incredible. We find new medicines, new ways of thinking that free our internal selves from shame and suffering, new technology that frees up time and energy, liberates people from slave labor. Progress has certainly had its place in the last century. However, it hasn't always been good. Case in point, the Russian Revolution, which ushered in decades of madness in Russia and its surrounding neighbors. But before we continue, please consider hitting that subscribe button. I'd like to just take a moment to ask, if you like videos like this one, please consider subscribing to the channel. Every little bit helps. You can like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, your choice. But anyway, let's get back to the video. A gentleman in Moscow follows Count Alexander Ilyich Rostov as he is placed under house arrest following the October Revolution in Russia. He is forbidden from leaving his hotel room at the Hotel Metropole in Moscow. His friends are murdered, and the whole of his country is changed forever, with no room left for him. But what he believes to be the end of his life is only the beginning. The series begins with Rostov being moved from his fancy suite to servants' quarters in the hotel. He is stripped of most of his belongings, and for the first 3 episodes, he clings to his identity as a count. The hotel staff appreciates his palate for wine and food, and knowledge as a gentleman, and they refer to him with honorifics. He's well liked around the hotel and falls into a routine as we learn more and more about his past. He had left Russia before the revolution, but came back to help his grandmother escape their ancestral home as it was burned to the ground by the revolutionaries. Rostov is sentimental in the beginning, missing his past, his family, and his traditions. He can't understand what prompted the revolution, or perhaps he can, but he doesn't speak much of it. As he meets various characters within the hotel, his past unfolds to us. We learn that he was sentenced only to house arrest rather than death, as many other aristocrats were, because he published a poem that was seen by many in the Communist Party as being in favor of the revolution. We learned that his best friend from college, Mishka, wrote the poem, but they decided to publish it in Rostov's name to protect Mishka because he was not an aristocrat, in case the monarchy at the time viewed it unfavorably. In his first few days in the hotel, Rostov meets Nina, a young girl who also stays in the hotel while her father works. She is fascinated by the Count's aristocratic heritage. He's a terrible snob, but also a good person. He seems to believe that his sole role as a gentleman is to bring refinement to the world around him. He's had the chance to leave Russia, but never seems to do so. As time passes in the hotel, he meets Anna, a budding actress that stays in the hotel while she's shooting her films, and starts up a relationship with her. Over time, he befriends others in the Hotel Metropole, building a kind of found family. Rostov builds daily routines, regular practices to keep his sanity, to keep him from remembering how limited he is in this new world. In doing so, he finds some happiness, at least initially. In the beginning, we see Rostov trapped in his old way of being. The hotel staff still refers to him as Count or Your Excellency. He's obsessed with the finer things in life. He wants the trappings of the past around him, defying his secret police officer Osip and stealing back some of the things that were taken from him, creating a secret room next to the servants' quarters he was assigned to, so that he can keep some of his finery hidden. He can't understand the revolution, but he loves his country and his past. Rostov clings to that past identity, seeing himself as a vanguard to the relic of aristocracy, trying to keep alive the finer things in life. Fancy bottles of wine and food and classical music, but when his grandmother dies abroad, he's reminded of his limits in this new world, in a way that routine and finery cannot save him from. He is the last Rostov now. He arranges a decently lavish funeral for her in the hotel, only to be ignored by his aristocrat friends. He later learns that they had all been exiled or murdered or imprisoned in some fashion. He is devastated at this loss, and at her funeral, he lashes out at Mishka and Nina, the only 2 people who were able to show up, decrying their revolution. In that moment, he drops the title Count from his name and decides to just be Alexander Rostov. Alexander sees how he is trapped and brainwashed by the past, clinging to something that is long gone and never coming back. He contemplates suicide, feeling that he himself is a relic in this new modern world. But then this happens.
Alexander, you were right. The bees, they've come back.
Taste that, apples. They must have heard you talking about your home. You see, you said they'd find a way. You said they'd come back. It's a sign they want you to stay, want you to look after them. No, you have so much more to give. Don't waste it.
This rooftop bee colony, which had gone missing, suddenly returns. He is reminded of his home that was burned down, and it feels almost as if God, despite being outlawed in Russia, is telling him that he still has value in the world. Very often, when one wishes to die, it is because something inside of us is trying to die. Not the whole of us, merely a part. It means that something inside of us is demanding that we change, let go of what no longer serves us. For Rostov, this was his heritage, because this new world is one that is only interested in progress. Progress that is blowing up sections of the city, slowly trying to remove evidence of the past. For some reason, we have spent the last 100 years thinking of progress as a good thing, or at the very least, a fact of life. And change is the nature of reality, but progress is not just change, it's also destruction of the old order, social, political, cultural, and very often of our lives. Americans are lucky that we've never experienced the kind of revolutions that we have fomented in other nations. And it's not because the movies keep us placated, as OSEP suggests here. It's because, for a long time, people believed in democracy in America. Progress and revolutions are often tied together, but not always. For the purposes of this discussion, we're only going to look at progress and revolution as a means of birthing the future. It's all about the future, the next thing, whatever it may be. A Gentleman in Moscow showcases just such a revolution in which the Russians overthrew their tyrannical aristocracy and installed a government that would be run by the people. Whether it panned out or not, at least initially, people believed it had to be better than the brutality of their previous kings. Throughout the series, we see the failures of the revolution and the following government, the brutality and the broken idealism of those in Rostov's life who decide to work within the movement. In this story, progress is quite problematic. The revolution in many ways sought to erase Russia's past, and even today we see how progress often means destroying history. From ideas and behaviors to relics and even events, history must be rewritten, but we are forced to question this assumption in the tale of the black apple of the forest that Rostov tells us.
Where I grew up, there was an old legend that hidden deep in the forest was a tree with apples as black as coal, and if you could find this tree and eat of its fruit, you could live your life anew. But there is nothing that would make me eat that apple, because even though it might erase the terrible wrongs and the unfortunate events of my life, it would also undo all the joy and happiness that I've had along the way.
It's not about some fruit in the forest, but rather about how our experiences, good and bad, inform our identities. Rostov could have run away, he could have left with his grandmother, he could have tried to cling to his identity as a count, but instead he chose life. He chooses everything that happens to him. He doesn't give anyone the satisfaction of hurting him, which is the key to being the master of one's circumstances. He speaks often of this story, always saying that he would never eat the apple, and this is something that the revolution and even our ideas of progress would be wise to learn. Cutting away memories to start fresh is an admirable goal, but if you have ever made a painting in acrylic or oil, you would know that one can never start from a purely blank canvas. Every painting is a compilation of layers and layers of work. So when progress attempts to destroy the past to make room for the new, to ensure that no kernel of the past can ever come back, we lose something essential. We lose the layers and layers of history that bring us to that point. Maybe the Soviet Union would have learned the lessons of the monarchy, of how totalitarian rule destroys totally. Even their workers' paradise only had a small group of people making decisions for a larger society, much like the royal family and its court. Perhaps it's an oversimplification, but I don't think it's wrong to say that history never repeats itself, but it certainly rhymes. Tradition, just like progress, can be used selectively to both build and destroy. These are fluid ideas, problematic when they become entrenched. There's propaganda to tradition just as there is to revolution. I think Rostov recognizes that the way that Nina behaves after going to school and being indoctrinated by the communists, she's being brainwashed, but he's being just as fanatical. If progress claims that only the new is best, then tradition demands we be fearful of all that is new and different. As tradition tells us to hold fast to what is familiar, progress demands that we push forward and seek only the new and different. In truth, both ways of thinking can become toxic when improperly applied. Neither alone can save us or build a world to live in that is whole. Rostov's deep entrenchment with his traditions, his status, is no better. He may not be an advocate of the Tsar or the aristocracy at large, but he truly believes in his work as a gentleman. The difference between him and Nina and Mishka is that he adapts and lets go when he sees that he is wrong. He makes a choice to reinvent himself, whereas when Nina and Mishka feel that somehow their revolution is leading them astray, they choose to double down. Rostov adapts to a time where gentility is dead by becoming more common. He even warns Mishka not to say anything when the party asks him to censor Chekhov's letters. But Mishka speaks out anyway, not adapting to a time where dissent is no longer safe. Rostov adapts, Mishka does not. And same with Nina. Rostov warns her not to go to Ukraine as part of the farm collectivization project, because even within the walls of the hotel, he knows what is happening in Russia is not good. She does anyway, and her husband ends up jailed in Siberia, and then she doubles down and leaves her daughter with Rostov while she goes to find him. In the end, she is murdered. The message here is simple. Devotion to any way of living or being, whether tradition or progress, is dangerous, especially in dangerous times, but really at any point in history. The title of the first episode episode, Master of Circumstances, says it all. We must be able to discern when tradition is appropriate and when progress is. For comfort, we should look to tradition, the familiar. In moments of necessary innovation, we look to progress. The real key to not becoming broken by either is discernment between the two. Rostov's story and his world shows us how both tradition and progress are broken ideals in Russia at this time because people follow them blindly. Both have their place, but when the monarchy chose to cling to tradition, or even when Rostov chose to cling to tradition, they suffered deeply. Rostov learned his lesson when he sent Mishka away for being in love with his sister because he was not an aristocrat, and he lost his sister in the process. And Mishka learned his lesson when he went to prison for following the revolution blindly, though unfortunately for him, it was a bit too late. A word here about politics. Young people love the idealism of revolution, and make no mistake, the ideas that lead people to revolution are ideal, and they're beautiful. It's the dreams of a utopia that spurs people to action, that things can not only be better, but much better, possibly even perfect. And while it is easy to dismiss Mishka and Nina as victims of the Russian Revolution, which was absolute insanity, there is a broader message here about youth in politics. In many ways, the idealism of Mishka and Nina and their doomed fates are symbolic of the politics of our modern world. It's no coincidence that in this story they are depicted as being young, because young people are the ones who get involved with politics regularly throughout history. Both believe that their revolution will be glorious, and they give everything to it, including eventually their lives. And this is true of all young people who dedicate themselves to revolutionary causes in modern times. College-age adults involved with the anti-war movement have experienced blowback for their actions. Being too involved with politics can be dangerous, depending on the movement and how deeply one is involved, because we lose our minds in fanaticism sometimes. They want to build a better future for themselves and future generations, but in this case, they both pay a heavy price for their choices, and it's no coincidence that they do, because young adults involved with protesting the situation in the Middle East right now are going through the same thing. It's fine to be involved in politics, but be aware of how much of yourself you give to a movement or cause. When Rostov adapts to survive, he becomes a vanguard to what is truly important, because some of us are here to burn down the house, some to build it back up, and the rest of us are here to keep the flame of life alive while they do it. Through constancy and routine in times of change, does civilization as we know it stay alive? As we wake, exercise, cook, clean, care for those who need it, and generally go about our daily lives, do we preserve life? And without life, revolution, war, tradition, none of it would exist. In doing so, we face down the challenges of life with dignity. Rostov and Anna both face setbacks and losses in their lives, but they persevere. They have routines and regularities, relationships with people they love and care about. Rostov lets go of his identity as an aristocrat because he sees how he does not belong in this new world, and he must adapt. In the same way that Anna lets go of her stardom, they do so without complaining or whining, because it is wiser to let go than to hold on to something dead. Rostov's greatest lesson in his confinement is learning that which is essential to life, and choosing his identity as just plain old Alexander the waiter, and choosing to be Sophia's adoptive father, and choosing to help the people of the Metropole Hotel. Rostov redefines what it means to be a gentleman, not some stodgy aristocrat trapped by tradition and rules of how to dress and eat and behave, but a man who cares for others no matter what. A gentleman, as Rostov redefines it for modern times, is moral in a world that is not. Someone who stays calm and kind in the face of violence, such as when another man attacks Rostov for supposedly taking his place at the barber. It's someone who stands up for his friends and cares for them. It's a person who has not just external financial resources as a wealthy aristocrat, but internal emotional resources as a good person. The kind it takes to sleep on the floor while your traumatized adoptive daughter takes your bed. The kind of emotional intelligence and health that it takes to play with her and teach her, even when she's not your own. The kind of emotional resources that it takes to carry her out of the hotel to the hospital when she's injured, risking your own life for hers. This is the essential definition of a gentleman, not a man with an old-fashioned mustache and fancy clothes who knows wine and food, but a man who knows what is essential to life and uses all he has to keep it. Someone who does the right thing no matter what, because not every aristocrat has to be evil. Not every person in power has to be problematic or seek to hurt others. Rostov nurtures Nina's daughter Sophia, and she goes on to become a piano prodigy. He cares for her the way a father would a child, even though she's not his. Because in the real world, beyond politics, she is what truly matters. Politics will come and go, but the gifts that we give each other, the love that we share, is forever. Don't waste more than you can give on politics, but rather focus on developing one's life. Rostov can be a protector not just of Sophia, but of a modern sense of gentility, good manners, and etiquette. Beyond just a knowledge of wine and food, he brings to the table a refinement that we all really need these days. We think nothing of being on our phones and ignoring our dining companions, or yelling at strangers when we're bothered. How many videos are there online of people losing their minds at someone over the smallest slight? Our lawmakers do do it, we do it, and this selfish barbarism is the hallmark of our world. Beyond fancy outfits and finery, beyond luxury and big houses, being a gentleman is about doing good. Rostov's definition of being a gentleman evolves with time, from being an aristocrat, part of a system of nobility, to simply being a good man who is a moral bulwark against the brutality of modernity. Where Osip, the policeman guarding him, and others in the party are callous, rude, and enjoy the suffering of others, Rostov is kind and seeks to bring joy to all that he meets. He starts out as a snob, sending Mishka away from his sister and telling Anna that he could never have been with an actress before the revolution, but that was what was expected of him at the time. Afterwards, he adapted, and in hard circumstances, he gave all that he could to those around him. In doing so, we are taught to embrace that which is timeless, neither modern nor old world, but lessons that apply to both. What are the lessons that are timeless in the face of tradition and progress? Because even traditions, food, alcohol, they are fleeting in the face of love and kindness and morality. Being a good person when it's hard, protecting the people you love when it's dangerous, loving someone when they can't give you everything, defending your friends when it's necessary, and not punching random jerks in the face. These are all the things that Rostov and other members of the hotel staff do over time, working hard to remain good in a world that is slowly destroying itself. Rostov's adaptation to the new Russia is a kind of discernment between tradition and progress. He keeps his mustache, though he changes the style, his knowledge, his morality, and his calm demeanor, but he opens himself up to new ideas, telling the story of the princess to Nina, and then to Sophia, but differently each time, as he sees the problematic aspects of class. Little girls who are not aristocrats do not want to hear that they are not enough because they are not royal, and he learns that the second time around. Unfortunately, he is at the mercy of progress, so as time goes by, he is forced to strip himself to what is essential, something we all have to do during moments of crisis. When the weight of progress bears down on them, Rostov and Anna find that love, their love for each other, for their friends at the hotel, and their adopted daughter prevails. It costs them their lives eventually, but none of us survive progress, just as none of us will ever survive life. But knowing that we die for things that mean something, not politics or monarchy, but love, well, hopefully that makes it all worthwhile. Much like the story of the Terminal, which I have a video on if you're interested, a gentleman in Moscow teaches us that hard times are best dealt with through what is essential, through routine. Whether it's revolution or crisis, when our circumstances are taken out of our control, we can only cope with them with what is in our control. Through love, relationships, routine, gratitude, we find ways to keep living even when we are told that we should not, because love and life matter more than politics. Though in many ways, Rostov lives life far from the horrors of Russia. His kitchen is stocked with food because the hotel must keep up the appearance of perfection to foreigners. He is safe from the secret police stalking him. He eventually becomes friends with Osip, the secret police officer looking after him, even if he is forced to spy for them from time to time. He doesn't have to worry about his neighbors ratting him out because they dislike him for some arbitrary reason. The hotel staff like and respect him because they aren't really communists. They deal too much with bourgeois things like fancy food to ever fit with the party. I say this because I know somewhere some communist will seethe and say this is a simple case of the hunter glorifying his own story because the mouse does not have a pen. And as someone who studied Russian political history in college, I can tell you that there is some of that. But the goal of this video was not to try and apologize for the sins of the aristocracy, to look at people as humans beyond politics. I doubt aristocrats were so kind or friendly at that time. Of course, given that the revolution shot most of them, I'm not sure we'll ever fully know. As I was told of communist Russia, there were rights for workers. Employment was guaranteed, so many people were free to pursue their creative interests on the side. Working as a janitor all day wasn't so bad because your bills were paid enough that you could have a band on the side at night. But then there are the stories of people being dragged off in the middle of the night by the secret police, and the censorship of media, and the lack of goods, among other things. The point being that it was a complex place, and the goal here, as I understand it, is not to talk about the October Revolution or Russia, as much as it is to talk about how negative politics can be and the importance of prioritizing other things. How political rules and regulations, allegiances to causes and parties can be problematic to one's life, whether it's the politics of tradition or progress, but also, more importantly, how politics can champion causes that may start off ideally, but end up destroying everything in their path. We must be wise in our discernment. It's more about finding peace and comfort in difficult political times, in moments where a new world is being born and everything feels painful. This story offers us the ability to look at those things which are timeless, whether it's Russia during the October Revolution or America in this moment post-pandemic. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this one, then I recommend you check out The Terminal. It's actually a very similar story, I'm realizing now as I'm finishing up here. But if you do like politics, you should check out my video on empathy across the aisles. It's all about how Yellowstone and The Batman can help to explain partisan politics in America right now. It's a weird combination, but trust me when I tell you it works. Either way, I'll see you in the next one. Bye!